Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at SpencerFernando.com. Welcome back to the show, Spencer, and how are your Winnipeg Jets doing?
Doing pretty good. It would have been nice if they got a win yesterday, but seems the series is going the same way the one against Nashville went. Start out with a big win, and they can't score too many goals, and then I think they're going to win it. I think it's their year.
Well, the team that you play in the semifinals is a pretty good club too, so that's what makes the NHL playoffs so interesting. They're so hard to predict.
Yeah.
Spencer, we have massive flooding in Atlantic Canada. We have serious flooding happening in the BC interior, record flood levels being reached in both places. Where is the Canadian Army?
That's a big question. A lot of people are saying they don't see as much of a presence as they used to. I think, part of it is just there isn't that much of an army to be sending out there. I mean, we have, generous to say we have 60,000 people, give or take, in the army, but I don't even know if it's that many when you consider who can actually be deployed, problems they have with equipment. So I think they have been called out to a few places, but, it seems like there's just not much of an army to send out.
Well, I was in Winnipeg when they had the Great Flood of 79, and the Canadian Armed Forces were all over that. I traveled by helicopter, courtesy of the Armed Forces, all over the place. And when really there was only water to be seen from one horizon to the other. It was more like Lake Manitoba for real.
Yeah.
But they were there helping sandbag and so on. In Atlantic Canada, apparently some soldiers have shown up to help in the aftermath, but it's not pumping out the house afterwards or helping drying it out. How about keeping it dry in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, since then, the military's really been, it's shrunk dramatically. I don't think people are really too aware of how little military Canada actually has. There was some increase during the Afghanistan war, but the trend overall has been just a tiny amount of spending on the military. And, I think we were talking just before we started up here about how, we have a gigantic amount of generals, and we have a very small amount of actual military personnel. So not only is the military small and underfunded, but a lot of the spending that actually is going towards it is very top-heavy. So it's, the equivalent of bureaucrats, military bureaucrats getting paid heavily. And there's a bunch of them. And then, frontline troops, not too many. So, really, we're a country that at this point depends entirely on the United States for our defense. It's not honest to say anything otherwise. And it's embarrassing. A country that's supposed to be a sovereign country. We have a big landmass to protect. We should have at least a decent-sized military, and we don't.
Well, I've seen television footage of children helping fill sandbags. Where are these big, burly fellows and sturdy women as well in the armed forces? Why aren't they there? Why doesn't Canada, because we have flooding problems every spring, invest in hundreds of sandbagging machines that load and dispense sandbags along a riverbank automatically? Where are those things? We've spent billions on feel-good projects and hockey rinks on top of Parliament Hill. Where are the sandbagging machines that we need?
Yeah, well, that's a big problem in the country, is that we spend a lot of money on things we really vanity projects, and we don't spend on things we actually need. And we only find that out when there's a crisis, and then by then it's too late.
And, of course, if the crisis happens on a Friday or a Saturday, there's nobody in Ottawa to help out. Because my friends there who cover Parliament Hill tell me the place pretty well clears out Thursday night.
Yeah, they've got to head back home.
Do you think Canadians should be insisting that our members of parliament maybe get out there and sandbag if they're physically capable?
I think so. I mean, leadership it's not just about passing legislation. It's about, I think, the example people set. And, you know, we say we're one big united country. Well, the best way to show that is to have, you know, MPs from across the country go help out when there's a disaster. But they generally don't seem to be much for the physical the physical labor at all. It's interesting. Most people, when they first get elected, you'll notice they tend to gain a ton of weight because they eat better than they ever did before. They get driven everywhere. They're going to events all the time. So in many ways, I mean, there's obviously the stress, which isn't healthy, but a lot of them, they eat very well and they don't have to be too active physically. So, you know, I think a lot of them are happy with that.
Well, I know emergency workers don't like the photo op thing. During the BC forest fire crisis, Prime Minister Harper showed up and insisted that fire crews come off the line to take pictures with him, and he wanted them to sing "O Canada" while they were gathered around him, and they refused to do so because they thought they'd abandoned their posts for political reasons.
Yeah, that's not good. I think politicians shouldn't. They should go and help, and they should just not tell the media. I mean, just do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're looking to put it in, your election campaign.
And already in BC, we are having forest fires. We had one on top of one of the local ski mountains in Vancouver where people were trapped behind it and had to be helicoptered out. We still don't know if they'll be using the Mars water bomber this year. They didn't use it last year, the worst forest fire season in BC history. The Mars water bomber, it may be from the 40s, but it puts out 4 acres of fire at a time. It keeps fires from becoming monstrous things. But somehow politicians have been convinced that little tiny airplanes that drop hundreds of gallons instead of thousands of gallons at once are the way to go, except that water evaporates before it gets to the fire. Do you think that we need more national attention? Should the resource like the Mars water bomber be nationalized so it's available to anywhere in Canada?
Well, yeah, there are certain things that definitely do need to be nationalized, and especially when it comes to national defense or security against disasters, there has to be, I think. That's one of the areas where centralization can be helpful. In most areas it's not, but in terms of a military or responding to disasters, there does need to be a central authority. But you know, I'm guessing that the government was probably lobbied by people making the new planes, which are worse, and they probably got lobbied into buying those instead. So that's how things go.
Well, sure, it makes for a cute photo op to see 5 or 6 of them line up in a row and dump their load. But I saw them line up on a burning barn last year, and the barn was still burning after they left.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like the U.S. still uses the B-52.
Well, the U.S. is using a
started building that in the 50s. I mean,
yeah.
Sometimes just the old ones still work best.
Exactly. I mean, why do you think the ice pilots fly those old warbirds? Yeah. They're tough. And they don't have to worry about dozens of computers breaking down in nasty conditions. We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after the break.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444. Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, what do you think of I call it the reverse sex scandal going on with the NDP in Ottawa, where a female member of parliament is accused of harassment, although no formal complaint has been filed against her. So what can the NDP actually investigate if no formal complaint has been made? And is this retaliation for her supporting a woman who claimed that she was sexually harassed.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to know what happened in that case. Like, I mean, to me, this is all people's personal lives, so it's odd that this is all being discussed so publicly. But I think Jagmeet Singh really backed himself into a corner, because he started using the language, we have to believe survivors. And, survivors is a pretty loaded term. I mean, it really implies someone was put in a life-threatening situation and were lucky to escape. And there's obviously a pretty big continuum between, obviously, a life-threatening situation and someone who isn't treated well at work. Both of them are bad, but to use the term survivor for every case, that's I think not helpful. But because he used that language, he now has to, investigate everything. It gets turned into a big deal. She kind of faces, there was Christine Moore, I think is the one you're talking about. There was an interesting editorial cartoon, and it showed her on the ground and with a boomerang next to her, which said "Me Too." So some of the talk is that, she was behind some MPs who got in trouble with kind of the Me Too movement stuff, and now it seems like she's facing her own Me Too moment. So we'll see what happens. I mean, she was pretty quick to play the victim card, and which is something she didn't necessarily give to some of the people she accused, it seems. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I wouldn't be shocked if there's a pretty big double standard in how this one gets handled as opposed to the other ones, though.
Yes, it's the old, if it's a male teacher abusing a female student, everybody's up in arms, and when it's a female teacher abusing a male student, other people just snicker and wink at each other.
Mm-hmm, yeah, people talk about how they want equality. People should be treated the same. Well, that's great, but then that means the punishments have to be the same, and it has to be dealt with the same. Otherwise, it's not really equality at all.
And you have to wonder, how can somebody have any kind of personal relationship at any point in their life when now it becomes a political football?
Yeah, that's kind of the dark side to all this, is that, people are imperfect, people make mistakes, and now it seems like mistakes get turned into national news stories, and so, it's going to embarrass a lot of people. It's not really good. But, I think in her situation, because she was involved in previous cases, I think it definitely makes it a little tougher for her to, claim that it's totally unfair when it's happening to her now.
And I saw she made a point at her news conference not to wear any makeup.
I didn't notice that, but I'm not sure what that's about.
Maybe she didn't have time to put it on before the show. Although, because people are so media savvy now, guys are putting on eyeliner before their news conferences.
Yeah, people put a lot of attention into how they're appearing in the media, so I'm sure there's kind of a calculation behind everything like that.
What has this done to the whole overall thing now, where you don't know whether to hug somebody, shake their hand, or stand 5 feet away and turn your back to them and salute the wall?
Yeah, I think it's definitely created a very, what's a good word for it? I guess people are very, very wary and very careful. And, I think for a lot of people, they're not sure how to act. And what's interesting is you see, everything, I think it starts out for a good reason, but then of course it gets often co-opted by people who then use it for their own political purposes. And you can see that in Ontario, where, any conservative politician is instantly going to get called sexist, and people are going to look for something to call them sexist for. So, something starts off for a good reason, and it gets twisted around, and I think we're starting to see that happening here.
Well, speaking of the Ontario election campaign, you have Conservative leader Doug Ford hiring actors to pretend to be supporters outside the debate. Is that, the right thing to do, politically correct?
Yeah, it's not really politically correct, but I'm surprised. People are surprised by stuff like that. Kathleen Wynne's been going around the province using government workers as props to campaign, even though she says, she's just talking about the business of government. So I'm not sure why people are surprised by that. So much of politics is, fake and made up, and the whole thing is basically, in many ways, a big farce. So, people are shocked. Oh, a politician lied. Oh, wow, that's unbelievable. Oh, they used actors. Not really a big surprise.
Well, you're absolutely right. I don't recall going to any government news conference where they didn't have a huge horde of workers in the background. But again, there's a difference between announcing a project that's going to be giving jobs to these people and hiring actors to pretend that they're construction workers. I think.
Yeah, I mean, and the governments do that all. I mean, I've been involved in, different political parties, both in, the political side and government side. And yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff like that, tons of, made up events or made up crowds or, people holding handmade signs that all look the same and have the exact same production design, which is kind of funny. So yeah, I mean, so much of it is made up. What's ironic with Doug Ford, though, is that he actually has a lot of grassroots support. I mean, whenever he holds rallies, he gets, thousands of people to attend. So it's kind of strange that they even felt the need to do that when he normally attracts big crowds on his own.
Well, Doug Ford is also, he does not have a media bus so that members of the established media can follow him easily. Instead, he has his own, quote, reporting crew with complete with fake flashes on their microphones so they look like there's some kind of network. Is that taking it to a new level?
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, because the thing on their microphone, it says Ford Nation, so I don't think anyone really thinks that it's, the official media. I think they're pretty clear about it. And I mean, the media can still attend events. They're still on itinerary. They still get photos and everything. I think, if you look at the coverage, I think the media has been more hostile towards him than they have towards the other parties. And, I've worked in, a few newspapers. And the thing is, I think most journalists, they're not consciously biased necessarily. But the people who get into it, on average, I mean, there's some conservative people, but on average, people who get into journalism tend to be more left-wing. And, human beings are human beings. It's impossible for that bias not to really seep out. So I don't really blame him for trying to bypass the media in a certain way to get his message right out to the people.
Well, sure. Being Donald Trump's the ultimate, where he just tweets things out and doesn't think that he has to, face the media at all. And he attacks people who are in the media, violating their First Amendment rights to free speech, which includes a free press.
Yeah, I don't think he's violated the rights to free speech, though, because, I mean, he's using his right to free speech to attack them. He's not taking away their right to attack him back. And he's still a citizen. He's still allowed to say what he wants, and the media can say what they want. And I mean, that is democracy in a certain way. It's definitely messy and chaotic, but at least people know where everybody stands in that case. There's no people aren't pretending to hide their views there.
Yes, that's the good thing about having alternative media, is that everybody has a voice. And I thought it was rather funny. On Facebook, somebody said the definition of a blog, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, is angry white men espousing points of view that nobody cares about. But I have to say that that doesn't include all the guests that I have. And
good save.
It's all talk to anybody who's angry.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, the thing that I find worse, though, is that the more governments are being held accountable, I think, through social media. People are able to share their opinions instead of having to wait for gatekeepers. The more the government talks about having to crack down on fake news. Fake news seems to often be news that the government doesn't like people sharing. So, like, you'll see Trudeau say, we need to fight back against populism. But if you look at the definition of populism, it's about basically representing the views of, the common people, which shouldn't be a bad thing at all. In fact, that's what democracy should be. So I think it's, we have to be wary of whenever the government says, there's a serious problem with fake news, we need to regulate it. It's going to end up getting rid of the news the government doesn't like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what movie John Wayne said it in, but he said, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death to defend your right to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know we have hate laws in Canada, but on the other hand, at what point does it become hate law, and when does it become just outright censorship?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what's concerning. You can already see the way I think Trudeau and everyone, they're trying to, set it up. Is first they say, we don't allow hate speech is not allowed, and then they'll say, our opponents are stoking populist tendencies. And then they'll say, populism is enabling hateful views. And so at what point do they basically say, our opponents can't speak because they're hateful? I mean, it's a very slippery slope. I mean, you look at the U.S., surely there's the dark side of, free speech. You have a lot of groups that, have horrible opinions that are sharing. But the flip side is everyone else is free to counteract that. If someone says something horrible and they have some terrible worldview, you're free to, argue against it and push back. And most common sense people don't subscribe to the views of crazy people, ranting about hateful rhetoric. So, I think we have to have more trust in people, trust that people, have common sense and will do the right thing. And, that means letting people see all the different opinions that are out there.
Do we have university political science professors scared to talk about or do lectures on hate speech and other hateful things or bad things because they're scared they might get charged with hate speech themselves?
I think so. I mean, universities have, it's embarrassing with it because they've totally surrendered to the most extreme far left students. I mean, a professor will say something not controversial at all to the average person. Some student will claim that it's racist, and then the university will panic and give in to that student and then condemn the professor. So if you're a professor, you're thinking, okay, what's the point? Why would I go out on a limb here when the university won't even back them up? So I think that's a serious problem. And Jordan Peterson, he's a great example of someone who's taken a lot of criticism, also benefited a lot because people really like his message. But, I mean, he started out getting a lot of criticism because he was, if you look at what he says really things that are, very much, true, very much common sense.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. A work program is planned for our Finland property that contains diamond-bearing kimberlite. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ADD, and the Frankfurt Exchange, symbol 82A1. Please visit our website at arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, going back to the Ontario election, there's some new poll results. What are they?
The PCs are at 40, the NDP 35, and Liberals at 22. So it's interesting. The PCs are still doing well in the 905 region. That's where the most votes are. So got about a 20-25% point lead there. But, it's still, the NDP seems like they're getting pretty close. And the number to watch is that 22% Liberal support, whether that collapses even further and goes to the NDP to stop Ford, or whether some of them go to the PCs because they're worried about what the NDP will do. So it'll be interesting to see.
Well, some of the policies are pretty interesting. We have Doug Ford saying if he's elected as premier, will eliminate any income tax on minimum wage earners, who probably don't pay a lot of income tax anyway. The NDP, isn't it true that they say they'll provide, I think, free dental care as part of their medical care package? Do you think that's attracted a lot of votes?
Yeah, it could attract some, but I think for the NDP, one of the things they've talked about is that they want to make Ontario a sanctuary province, which means public services would be given to people in the province illegally. So you combine that with the fact that public services are already stretched pretty thin. They've already got a huge deficit. Their debt's the biggest subnational debt in the world. And there's a border crisis where people are coming across in big numbers illegally. And then you're saying, oh, by the way, free services for everyone in the country illegally. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
Of course, what's the deterrent to keep people from crossing the border illegally? And by the way, do you think the federal government is doing enough to resist? Because if you come across at a regular border crossing and they think that you're illegal, they just turn you around in the other direction and boot you out. But right now, if you're between border crossings, it seems to be okay to come into Canada.
Yeah, it's a total loophole. And, yeah, the government's not doing nearly enough. I think the problem is they keep talking about, the law, this, regulation, blah, blah, blah. But it's really more of a advertising problem. And, people aren't dumb. They watch TV. They see that everyone crossing into Canada gets basically chauffeured across the border. A lot of them can get welfare payments. They can get jobs, housing, education, healthcare. So there's obviously an incentive to come here. And then only 1% of people, fewer than 1% actually, who crossed illegally since April 2017 have been sent back. So obviously a huge incentive. Meanwhile, people doing it legally are waiting in line even longer. But what the government really has to do is, I mean, if all it would take is just a few people, watching and seeing, okay, well, people who cross illegally are getting put on planes and then they're getting flown back to the country they didn't want to get deported from. Do that a few times and it sends a pretty clear message, and there'd be a lot fewer people coming across the border. But right now, there's no reason for people not to try because it works out well for them.
Spencer, you're looking at a report done by the Fraser Institute in Vancouver. What does that report say about pipelines?
Yeah, the shortage of pipelines is going to cost Canada $15.8 billion this year.
What was that number again?
$15.8 billion.
That's an incredible amount of money.
Yeah, and the big issue is the differential, because we have to, because of regulations, lack of pipelines, we have really no ability to get the oil out of Canada except to the United States. And when you have only one person buying your product, they in many ways get to set the price. So there's a huge differential, and between the price of Canadian oil and West Texas crude, or West Texas Intermediate. And so basically we're subsidizing cheap energy for the U.S., making ourselves poor, and pushing investment there, because if you want to get pipelines done, then go to the States, because right now it's impossible to do it here. So, yeah, we're basically wasting our own resource.
How come people on the East Coast seem to be okay with importing conflict oil from the Middle East and other nasty places, but they don't want to have oil from peaceful Alberta?
Yeah, I think it's because Canada's really, our government is, just to be honest, just weak and stupid. I mean, what other country lets their own resource get attacked from within the country and from people outside the country paying to make Canadians pay their own resource, and then buys that same resource more expensively from, I mean, it would be incredibly stupid. It's like Russia has a ton of natural gas. So imagine if Russia had a bunch of groups saying, stop all natural gas production in Russia. They started shutting down production, then they started ordering natural gas from other countries. I mean, we'd look at them and say, well, what a bunch of idiots. So when we do that here, it seems that people are like, oh yeah, that's just how things go. So, yeah, it's very dumb. And what's funny is a lot of the people who are trying to talk down Canada's energy industry are the same people who are the most anti-American, and yet we're subsidizing cheap energy for the U.S. and sending money there. So, yeah, it makes no sense at all.
Apparently the oil that's shipped from Alaska down the BC coast is exactly the same kind of oil that comes from Alberta.
Yeah.
Why
does it's a marketing problem. I mean, we've let our own energy industry be marketed in a bad way by people who don't like it. And the thing is, a lot of the groups that are opposing it are funded, I'm sure, by, people in the States and people in the Middle East who have a huge competitive interest in seeing Canada not produce any oil at all. So, it would be kind of equivalent to, the Coke Corporation letting Pepsi create a bunch of front groups saying how bad Coke is and you should buy Pepsi. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense.
Sure, they're both diabetes in a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Spencer, anything else you want to? Spencer, anything else you wanted to add today?
No, should be good.
Thanks a lot for chatting with us.
No problem.
My guest has been investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at SpencerFernando.com. If you have any questions for Spencer or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.